Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another Climbing the Rating Ladder video. I'm playing Guao Guao, adhering to my rule about it's better to be a high 1600 than a low 1700. Applicable at all rating ranges, by the way. My opponent opens with e4. Let's play a Sicilian. All right, knight f3. What am I in the mood for today? Maybe knight c6. I don't play this too often, but I know there's some Sveshnikov players out there. Okay, white plays bishop c4. This is the Bowdler Attack. I'll go e6. You face this so often online if you're a Sicilian player, so hopefully this is instructive. It's not a terrible opening, but it's not too testing either if black knows what they're doing. So generally, we want to bring the knights out to c6, f6. We want to look for a moment to play d5. Possibly we can think about a6, b5 as an alternative plan. I think in this exact position, I will play knight f6. Attack this pawn. I'm not going to fear e5 because after knight g4, it can be hard for white to keep this pawn on e5. So let's see if white commits to advancing that pawn or if they choose something like d3, rook e1, something along those lines. Okay, white pausing to think. I'm pausing to sip my coffee. All right, knight c3. So I know I can employ the center fork trick if I want. Knight takes e4, knight takes e4, d5. Look to swap in the center. Probably a pretty good option. I imagine I achieve equality without too many troubles by doing that. Let's say bishop d3 at that point. Maybe I could even throw in c4 if I wanted there. But I don't have to play knight takes e4 if I don't want to. I could play a6, bishop e7. d5 is possible, although personally I prefer to play d5 once I've ruled out bishop b5. So if you imagine we push d5 and there's a swap, bishop b5 can be annoying. So let's go ahead and play a6. But yeah, do be aware, knight takes e4 followed by d5 if you just want to keep things simple. Okay, now my opponent plays e5, so they do switch it up. Let's play knight g4. Looking for that pressure on the pawn. So we're going to see white likely try to reinforce this pawn in a couple ways. My queen can come to c7 to add another attacker. And although I probably won't be able to win the pawn outright, I can play d6 or maybe even f6 if I want. Preemptive apologies to Ben Feingold. So yeah, I might go for f6, but likely I think queen c7, d6 or d5. And again, this is assuming white plays, let's say, rook e1, queen c7, queen e2, d6 or d5 there on the agenda. And if pawn takes on d6, bishop takes d6, notice how the pawn on a6, handy in preventing knight b5. That's a typical scenario in a Sicilian, that pawn restricting white's knight on c3 specifically. One other option I should have mentioned, d5 here. I think the computer may say d5 is a good option for black. I definitely should have mentioned that too. So you can respond to e5 with d5. Attack the bishop on c4. Okay, white plays d4, but that looks like it's going to lead to the loss of the pawn straight up for white. I'm trying to anticipate where I may have troubles here, but pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. That does hit my knight on g4 with white's queen, but I can play knight g4 takes e5, even the other knight taking e5. So let's not delay. Let's take here. Bishop g5, I don't think I'm concerned about. Bishop e7 at a minimum, or I could go for the Feingold special, what Ben warns against, and play f6 if I want. Try to attack both pieces. You know, the Bowdler Attack, I think people play it because they're playing as if they're playing against e5, double king pawn. They're used to Italian game development, and so they just do that out of inertia against the Sicilian as well. You will continue to face that pretty high up the rating ladder, honestly. So even all the way up to 2000, you see this bishop c4 system a lot of times, and often the moves are just dashed out. I don't think white thinks about it too much. In general, when you're playing the Sicilian at amateur level, you will face lines that are harder to predict than within 1e4, e5, double king pawn, I would say. Okay, knight e2. So white doesn't even take the pawn back. But again, this pawn is hanging. I'm thinking about just snatching it right away, which hits the bishop. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to consider too much beyond that. Let's just pre-move this capture on e5. So hit the bishop. White can play queen takes d4, but I'm more than happy to take this bishop. And notice that in addition to having won the pawn, I will have 2 center pawns against none, and I will have 2 bishops against white's bishop and knight. And the game is not going to be over immediately by any means, but for all intents and purposes, we've won the opening battle. That's for sure. So queen c7 is another move that kind of comes to mind. Defends the knight. Vaguely looking at stuff like bishop c5, maybe b5, bishop b7. I think that's a pretty good option too. But given that I'm up a pawn for pretty much nothing here, I'm going to keep it simple and simply capture on c4. Probably play bishop e7 now and castle. I could play d5 first, but if white positions their queen here or here, I don't want to have to guard g7 or worry about if my bishop moves, queen takes g7. Yeah, so I think bishop e7 is appropriate here. Don't be afraid to play outwardly like slightly defensive moves when you're already up a pawn. There is sometimes a period where to fully consolidate your advantage, you have to err on the side of just playing cautiously. So my bishop controls a lot of territory. I'm not worried about the fact that I have no pieces beyond the 7th rank right now. Only pawns beyond the 7th rank. Because I got the goods. I got the extra pawn. White, on the other hand, has to do something to mix this up. So I think white's plan is going to be bishop h6 if I castle. I do see I can play bishop f6 in reply to that, which is probably what I'm going to do. The alternative is something like g6, but that allows here. So yeah, I think bishop f6 immediately might also vaguely be playable, but queen b4 perhaps. So I think I'll probably just castle. Let's do it. So bishop here, bishop f6. No, knight g3. Okay. So white withholds the bishop move, maybe flirting with knight to h5 is an idea. I could play f5 here, kind of an interesting move. Back off the queen. d5 certainly looks pretty good too. The only thing is after knight h5, do I want to commit to g6 at that point? I think as long as I keep my dark square bishop, it's fine. But I might want to play this f5 move and conclusively chase white's queen and look to develop from there. So yeah, this is interesting. I think that's a pretty good try for white. King h8 might be okay too here. Looking for knight h5, rook g8, something along those lines. If I play b5, I just got to be careful about this diagonal too. Don't think it's any immediate cause for concern. Yeah, because let's say I play d5, just thinking through the permutations here, bishop h6, bishop f6, and then knight h5. It's a little bit annoying. So my 2 top candidates, I'd say here, are king h8 or f5. Maybe slightly leaning towards king h8 at the moment. I'm below 5 minutes now, so I don't want to spend too much longer. But yeah, slightly leaning towards king h8. I think I will play that move. It looks kind of passive, but I think after rook g8, I'm going to be able to push white back. And I'm leaning towards playing d5 and maybe getting an e5, trying to activate the light square bishop this way. Keeping a lot of flexibility in the process too. Okay, bishop e3 played quickly. Now, Again, I'm looking at this f5 move because white has two minor pieces on the same rank with one square in between. So f5, f4, that's a motif we have to be aware of here. In fact, after this, what is white going to do? Queen f4 or queen f3 most likely, but queen f3 runs into f4, bishop takes, and then e5. So I think on f5, white would have to play queen f4. Not the end of the world, but maybe I have something like d6 followed by e5. Yeah, let's go ahead and play this move. I like the look of it. I know I mentioned it before, but let's try to poke and prod and give white something to think about here. Advancing with tempo on the white queen. Oh, congratulations to Dingler N, by the way. I wanted to say that. I haven't made a video since Ding officially became world champion. Yeah, I was pleased to see that. Whoa, what is this? Speaking of being pleased to see moves, is my opponent going to resign after this? Okay. I don't know what this is. I guess I'll take your pieces, my friend. Yeah, queen takes g7 was not on my list of candidate moves there. I think this is white's idea of trying to resign. I don't know. All right, let's play this kind of quickly because I don't think there's too much instructive value at this stage. Bishop c5 or queen b6 both look pretty good. Attack this pawn. Let's play queen g8. Attack this pawn this way. Rook e4. Yeah, okay. So my opponent is embracing the sacrifice all your pieces philosophy. I don't think they quite had to do that yet. But evidently they saw that they were losing the game. Okay, we knew this one, but let's play queen g2. We'll leave white with the rook. We'll leave white with one piece. All right, so abrupt ending to that one. Still, though, I think the position was quite good, if not winning for black towards the end. f5, maybe white saw my idea, but queen f3 is still a game. Or sorry, queen f4, I think is still a game. Because I don't believe I can brute force win a piece there. Yeah, like e5 wouldn't be working. g5's too risky on the diagonal here. So queen f4, white was staying in it. But what can we glean from this one? Maybe just a bit of discussion about the Bowdler. I think I mentioned some ideas. Like I prefer to play knight c6. So even if we got into it via a different move order like d6, bishop c4, I'd probably still play knight c6 there. And then look to play e6, knight f6, work our way up to d5. It is kind of nice when your d pawn is back. You haven't committed to d6 against the Bowdler, because then you can go d5 in one move. But this is completely fine for black as well. Just doing something along these lines. e6, maybe throw an a6 again if you want to rule out bishop e5. Maybe bishop e7, castles, work your way up to d5. Not the only way to handle it, but that's what I'd recommend, is working your way up to d5 after sufficient development. Let's click to our analysis board. Shout out to the analysis gang. Yeah, so check the game review real quick. I got a 92.1, 72.9 for my opponent, which is honestly pretty impressive given that they sacrificed almost all their pieces in the waning moments of this game. So knight c6. Yeah, I was thinking if white went for an open Sicilian d4, take to either play into a Sveshnikov, which is this, or possibly go for a accelerated dragon with g6 and bishop g7. I do think that's a good option for amateur players too. And this is climbing the rating ladder. I want to try to give you guys as many useful takeaways, as many things that'll stick in your head as possible. And hey, if you're ever looking to take up a Sicilian sometime, I think the hyper accelerated, which is g6 on move 2, or the accelerated knight c6 first, and then going into g6 thereafter in the open Sicilian. I think that's a pretty good option. Not the only option, but a pretty good one. So white plays bishop c4. Yeah, an e6, castles. Interesting that it tags this as an inaccuracy. I mean, it's barely registering as an inaccuracy. Wants to go d5 right away. Let's look in the opening book. Let me shrink my camera slightly here. Okay, so a6, d6, d5. Knight f6 only played 3 times in the database of master games. But I think it's kind of hard to go wrong here for black, so long as you're playing a logical move. D6, pretty popular. Again, not a mistake to play D6, but I would prefer to at least keep open the option of playing D5 in one move. But if you go D5 here, I just think this somewhat plays into white's hands, where they get to initiate this pin and rook E1 is coming. I've seen some games where black is caught a little bit flat-footed when this occurs, wishing they had more development going, and wishing maybe that they weren't faced with white inflicting double pawns on black. So knight f6, I like it when they play e5, so I'm kind of curious why the computer tags this as an inaccuracy. I mean, it's barely registering. In fact, on the local analysis here, knight f6 is the second move. So yeah, I think we can safely ignore this. Sorry, chess.com. I'm overruling your dubious mark. And again, if e5, we're happy to go knight g4, attack this pawn. Let's say rook e1, queen c7, hitting this pawn again, queen e2. Yeah, and you can see here d6 or d5. Let's say d6. Looking to trade it, but you get this built-in pressure against h2. Yeah, h3, knight ge5, looking pretty good for black, even in the event of some trades. Take some way. I wouldn't have minded playing this position. Probably castle, b6, bishop b7, maybe. Establish two nice bishops shooting towards the white king. Yeah, so instead, white plays knight c3, and that is tagged as an inaccuracy. White could settle for d3, something like that. And again, I probably would have played a6 here, maybe work up to d5, something along those lines. Rook e1 would somewhat stop d5 because I am looking to recapture with the pawn. But yeah, again, if you have to settle for d6, that's fine. Let's just make some logical looking moves here. Knight c3, bishop e7, I don't know, bishop g5, castles, h3. You can think about expanding on the queen side if you want, sending this bishop to b7, maybe knight d4. If you go for the e6, d6 structure, black's usually going to be playing more so on this part of the board, the center / queen side. So you might try to creep up the side using the superior pawn play that you have. Sometimes you might even stick a knight on e5. I played games where, just to show this structure, these pawns, despite being doubled, control quite a bit of territory and make it hard for white to get through. You get some play down the d file, maybe queen c7, rook d8, c4. So again, I wouldn't worry too much about exact moves here. Follow this maxim, get both knights out. Think about d5, throw in a6 if bishop b5 is ever a concern. I've seen some people play this with b5 pretty aggressively and soon. Yeah, don't worry about memorizing theory too much against this approach. It's mostly ideas and setups you want to have in mind. Yeah, a6. Again, tagged as an inaccuracy, but it's in the top 3 moves. Barely moves the needle in terms of the eval. But yeah, if I want to play this as simple as possible, knight takes e4, get white to take, and then d5 center fork trick. I just thought that might kill some of the interest in the position, but yeah, this is plenty good as well. I think I mentioned this line, which the engine gives a tiny edge for black. So a6 and then e5, which seems a little inconsistent. Yeah, the computer just outright gives that a question mark. Again, maybe a bit much, saying that's a question mark move. And I played knight g4 right away, but I should have mentioned that d5, that is often a move the computer likes in response to e5, attacking the bishop. And if something like this happens, we get a series of trades. This is equal material, but the position's opening up, and black should enjoy some slight edge with the bishop pair, I think. This pawn can be defended, I think. B5. Even knight d4, apparently. Counterattack. Something like this. Interesting. A little more advanced. But you can see the plethora of options that black has against this setup. The knight takes e4 center fork trick. Baiting white into playing e5 so we can attack it with knight g4 as in the game. Meeting e5 with d5 as we see here. Just a lot of options at your disposal. So knight g4. Attacking the pawn. Yeah, and here white played d4. I think this is already getting white into pretty dubious territory. It seems to lose a pawn. So I was anticipating this, which is kind of similar to the other line that we had, where I probably would have played d6 here. D5 also given. That could transpose. Is there a problem with d6 directly? D4. Okay, interesting. Can't say that that is intuitive to me. Wow, knight d5 here. Double exclam, because if I take here, and all of a sudden get the discovery there. So we should be alert about stuff that could happen with our uncastled king and white's rook and queen lined up on the e-file. Doesn't look like it's a huge deal, though. D5 actually bypasses that option. Doesn't give white a chance to play the d4 move because we're hitting the bishop. And if takes, yeah, take with the bishop. We looked at something like this moments ago. Or b5. Yeah, b5, bishop e7. Also very interesting because on b5, bishop b3, we trap the bishop. That's a pattern you definitely want to know. So that would be pretty intriguing as well. Yeah, just something like this. Playing this a little more avant-garde. Huh, look at that. H5 fishing pole style idea. I'll refrain from analyzing this too much, but that looks pretty interesting too. That's the idea here. Queen takes e5. Threaten the knight and also threaten mate in 2. So that's an example of using the queenside pawns without worrying about pushing d6 or d5. But on knight g4, white played this d4 move, but we get to knock out the base. If a pawn structure is like a tree, how do you chop down a tree? You start at the base, right? You start at the bottom of the tree. So we can chop off the d4 support of the pawn on e5. So we take knight e2. Yeah, if white played knight takes d4 directly, I probably would have taken this way. Looks kind of similar to the game. So knight e2, I take e5. Really harsh with these evals. I think I asked this in the last video, but is it just me or have the chess.com evaluations just become more, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. More severe. Like it's nitpicking more. It's trying to find inaccuracies in moves that don't even appear to be wrong. Again, like the local eval gives no difference between these moves. Knight c takes e5 is best. That's funny because they could transpose, right? Knight takes e5, knight takes e5. Chess.com, I don't know. I think you should dial back your algorithm for detecting inaccuracies a little bit. What do you guys think? Might be bad for business if they if they don't. But okay, trade here. Queen takes d4. Yeah, it's recommending bishop b3. But that's just an extra pawn. Because currently black is up 2 pawns. I have all 8 of my pawns remaining in this position. White has 6. So yeah, the best white is going to do is gain 1 pawn back. Yeah, bishop e7, inaccuracy for some reason. Still not seeing it. Okay, castle, yep. So I was going to meet bishop h6 with bishop f6 here to defend. And then probably look to play d5, e5. If white went knight g3 looking for this, this would be a good moment, I think, to play king h8 and actually threaten the bishop now that there's no pin. Yeah, knight g3. Ooh, king h8 gets the full red X is a miss. A miss. Okay. Yeah, f5. I've recommended here. Did mention this move, but king h8 seemed like it solved some issues, and I kept open the option of f5. But I'm willing to concede that f5 right away might be better. Let's see how it wants to play it. f5, queen f3, queen c7. Okay. Try to go b5 soon. Interesting. Rook b8, so we don't lose the rook. Yeah, work up to b5, bishop e7, leave the pawn on d7. That does make sense. I guess we're not afraid of this. Yeah, we can play this. Work up to e5. But king h8 still looks pretty good. I thought white would continue knight h5 and attack on g7. I was just going to play rook g8 and then decide how I want to proceed from there with everything secure. Seems kind of hard for white to meaningfully attack this pawn further, like let's say bishop e3. I think d5. If white plays bishop d4, they actually run into e5 with the double attack here. So we're okay with crouching for a while behind our pawn structure. At some point, the position is going to unfurl, and we're gonna get an advantage, or we're gonna build on our advantage more than likely because we're already quite a bit better here up the pawn. White played bishop e3, and this seemed like a good moment to play f5. Again, I think the game still continues. Yeah, it looks like in addition to queen f4, there's also queen d4, queen c4, which keep an eye on this square. So I can't push because it takes. So I don't know why white chose this moment to just go nuts and give all their pieces away. But that wasn't necessary yet. They're still hanging on if they choose some move like this. I was thinking d6 and e5, work our way up to f4. Yes, this is probably a technically winning position for black, but the game is by no means over. And you saw the rest. Okay, so not the most competitive game after the opening, but hopefully this gave you some ideas in the Bowdler Attack. Again, you can see this from a variety of second moves, or even white playing bishop c4 on move 2, by the way, if they reveal their hand right away. In that case, I would definitely play e6, personally. But you frequently see the Bowdler via knight f3 first. Might even be the best way to enter the Bowdler if white is intent on doing so, because at least then they get to see what black is going to play on move 2, which is usually going to be one of these 4 moves. So whichever of those moves you play as black, just know you can work up to d5. You can throw in the a6 move. I would recommend getting both knights out before you push d5, if you're going to do that at all. And it is okay, too, to settle for something along these lines where you play e6. That's totally okay. You don't have to push d5 if you don't want to. I was mentioning positions of this variety. This is okay, too. In that case, if this pawn's sitting here and you go for this kind of small center approach, e6, d6, I would try to fianchetto the bishop, even if white prevents you from playing b5. Feel free to do something like this. And again, most likely you're going to play on this part of the board. Maybe still work up to d5. But most likely going to be playing in the center and on the queen side. Maybe even some maneuver like this. And not being afraid of doubled e-pawns. Okay, let me know. I'm very happy to answer any Bowdler-related questions in the comments or any other questions that you guys might have. Congratulations once again to the new world champion, Ding Liren. Check out my video where I play Ding. This was 4 years ago in the Pro Chess League. I'll link it down below, but if you're curious, I played him in a 15+10 game in the Pro Chess League when he was world number 4, and I changed the title to, instead of playing world number 4, Ding Liren, playing future world chess champion, Ding Liren. I changed that after Ding won the world championship. So once again, congrats to him. Congrats to Nepo as well. Great match, great fight. And let me know if you guys have any questions on this video. And thanks again for watching, everyone. And I'll see you guys again soon with another video.